Hi, I'm Paul Pasulka, Ivy Masters Learning Center and ivymasters.com. Today we're going to look at Test 3, Section 2, number 23, which reads, which choice most effectively combines the underlined sentences? And so, you read the original, 1-MCP lengthens storage life by 3 to 4 times when applied to apples. This extended life shows producers to sell their apples in the off-season, months after the apples have been harvested. Now, one thing is, when you get these types of questions, whenever a question's asked, what's important to do is pay attention to transitions. Now, I'm not talking about when answer choice A is no choice, and then you have your other answer choices. But when a question like, what's the best way to combine the underlined parts, pay attention to transitions. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the first sentence of the paragraph, the sentence before it, and that's going to give me some insight. I'm going to highlight an important detail that's going to help me get my answer. Marketed as Smart Fresh, the chemical 1-MCP, 1-methycyclopropene, has been used by fruit growers since 2002 in the United States and elsewhere to preserve the crispness and length of storage life of apples and other fruit, which often must travel long distances before being eaten by consumers. And then you get your options. Well, it just mentioned apples and other fruit, so how you probably want to start your answer choice is when applied to apples. And answer choice A, it does wind up being the correct answer. But notice the placement of when applied to apples in the other answer choices. And it seems a little bit awkward. So answer choice B, producers are allowed to sell their apples months after they have been harvested in the off-season because 1-MCP, when applied to apples, lengthens their storage life by 3 to 4 times. You'd probably want to know what you're applying it to before you get into the rigmarole about exactly what's going on there. Answer choice C, 1-MCP lengthens storage life when applied to apples by 3 to 4 times, allowing producers to sell their apples months after the apples have been harvested in the off-season. Not quite as bad. It is towards the beginning. We're going to look at other reasons why answer choice A is your correct answer. Answer choice D, months after the apples have been harvested, producers are allowed to sell their apples in the off-season because 1-MCP lengthens storage life when applied to apples by 3 to 4 times. And there you get it right in the end. That's probably the worst placement of all. Another thing that you see in the answer choices is the use of allowing. When you say allowing, it sounds like the manufacturers, the producers are able to sell their apples in the off-season when you use allowing as it's used in answer choice A. Whereas in answer choice B, allowed to sell their apples sounds like someone else is telling them whether or not they're permitted to sell their apples. So I'm going to read it with answer choice A. You'll probably like the use of allowed in A rather than B. When applied to apples, 1-MCP lengthens storage life by 3 to 4 times, allowing producers to sell their apples in off-season, months after the apples have been harvested. Answer choice B, again, it sounds like you're being permitted to. Producers are allowed to sell their apples in months after they have been harvested in off-season because 1-MCP, when applied to apples, lengthens storage life by 3 to 4 times. Answer choice C, let's check that use of allow. 1-MCP lengthens storage life when applied to apples by 3 to 4 times, allowing producers to sell their apples months after the apples have been harvested in off-season. That use of allowing is fine. Answer choice D, months after the apples have been harvested, producers are allowed to sell their apples in the off-season because 1-MCP lengthens storage life when applied to apples by 3 to 4 times. Answer choice D also sounds like it's like the producers are permitted by law to sell their apples, and that's really not what we see here. And then lastly, the use of in the off-season, comma, months after the apples have been harvested. That would be your natural word order. Why? Because sentences, paragraphs, tend to go from general to specific. So you'd probably say in the off-season, and then get more specific after that, months after the apples have been harvested. That makes more logical sense. So when we look at answer choice B, producers are allowed to sell their apples months after they have been harvested in the off-season. That's the reverse order, not as good. Answer choice C, 1-MCP lengthens storage life when applied to apples by 3 to 4 times, allowing producers to sell their apples after the apples have been harvested in the off season, not as good of a word order. And then answer choice D, months after the apples have been harvested, producers are allowed to sell their apples in the off season. And that actually splits in the off season and months after the apples have been harvested. So that is the worst placement. So it's not B or C or D for those reasons. Answer choice A is your correct answer. Thank you for joining us today. If you like this video, click like. You could share it with someone who has trouble with sentence combination questions, or you could tag them in the comments. If there's any question you'd like to see answered from any official SAT or PSAT or ACT, you can leave that in the comments as well. And click subscribe so you don't miss anything. Have a great day.